Great Wall of China. Building successfully with dirt depends on two things. First, add a binding material to the earth so it won't crack and fall apart.
Try and be like the rain. Sprinkle it all over, but lightly.
Today, the New Zealand crew's using flax fibers that grow nearby. But the first emperor's builders had binders of their own that were just as easy to find.
The Chinese use sticky rice to bind their soil. It's also quite common to use manure.
Second, keep water out. Water will find its way into any air pockets inside an earthen wall. Once inside, it will turn the earth to mud, or freeze and expand, and the wall will collapse. So, if you're building with earth, you need to make sure it doesn't have any air pockets. And there's only one way to do that. Ramming it down into a frame to squeeze out all the air until it's as dense as concrete.
Judging from what I can see, the boys have done a very good job, and I can tell because this wall is very smooth, and when you feel it, it's very solid, and that means we got the ramming right.
And these guys aren't the only ones who got it right. In Xi'an, archaeologists are excavating the tomb of an ancient Chinese general. Its rammed earth walls are nearly 2,000 years old and still going strong.
The secret of this rammed earth construction is to build it up in small layers and pound it very, very thoroughly until it becomes extremely hard. That way it becomes very, very stable. This wall shows the rammed earth construction. What we see here are many, many layers, perhaps 25 or 30 just in this small part of wall that have been marked out by the archaeologist, each one showing a layer of rammed earth. It would have taken hundreds of men many months to complete the whole tomb using this method of rammed earth construction. To knock on it, it's almost as hard as concrete.
Hundreds of layers of rammed earth built this general's tomb, and it was tiny compared with the tomb of China's first emperor. A man-made mountain some 350 meters on each side, between 50 and 70 meters high, and made from more than 3.5 million tons of earth. And it was more than just a tomb. It was nearly 6,000 hectares, one of the largest mortuary complexes anywhere on Earth. The tomb's never been excavated, but ancient accounts give an unforgettable description of the burial chamber. Its roof shining with heavenly constellations. Its floor recreating the emperor's realm with flowing rivers and oceans made of mercury. And replicas of all his palaces waiting to welcome his soul. Surrounded by everything he would need to rule for eternity as he had on Earth. Everything. The ancient accounts don't even mention what his tomb builders tucked away in 3 obscure pits in one corner of the tomb. An army of clay, 8,000 strong, the now famous terracotta warriors. Nearby pits held other magnificent statues of jugglers, acrobats, officials and chariots, and horses attended by their grooms. The emperor's world modeled in bronze and clay. And a break from a very dark tradition. Before the first emperor, Chinese rulers sacrificed real people to serve them in death. But the number of human lives needed to equip this tomb for the afterlife would have been too awful to contemplate.
By the time of the first emperor, it was clear that you couldn't literally slay an entire regiment of an army, but replicas were perfectly satisfactory.
But concubines were different. Ancient records claim that the first emperor took all his childless concubines with him to the grave. But are those ancient records true? In 2005, a team of archaeologists found evidence they might be. They discovered the outlines of a huge 80 by 50 meter chamber inside the mound, surrounded by a stone wall nearly 150 meters long and 125 meters wide. They also discovered high concentrations of mercury in the surrounding soil. A huge burial chamber and high concentrations of mercury hint that tales of underground rivers and seas of mercury and stories of sacrificed concubines might be true. But there's another incredible story about this tomb. A story that's created a mystery. A mystery that remains unsolved to this day. Ancient records say that when the first emperor's tomb was finished, it was 115 meters high, twice as tall as it is today. At that height, its base would have been 500 meters on each side, making the tomb 5 times bigger than it is today, and 4 times bigger than Egypt's Great Pyramid. If it was so much bigger, why is it so much smaller today? Many experts believe that 2,000 years of wind and rain have eroded the tomb's enormous dirt mound. But there's another theory. Some believe the tomb's too low because it was never finished. Why would the most powerful man in China spend years building himself an incredible tomb and then not finish it? In this pomegranate orchard near the tomb, archaeologist Zhang Zhongli may have found the answer.
There are huge numbers of bones here. This one is either a thigh or a shin. There is a scalp over here. You can even see teeth here. So the body lies this way.
The first emperor's tomb wasn't just built with tons of cheap dirt. It was also built with thousands of cheap human lives.
We cannot tell how many skeletons are here. They're all mixed together. I think there's one here and another over here. The bodies are not placed in any order. This is a group tomb.
Who were these people? Their modern portraits are nearby. When he unified all of China, the first emperor acquired the biggest labor force in Chinese history. A force he conscripted to build his mega tomb. Today, visitors to the tomb site see those workers depicted as heroes. But their bones tell a very different story.
Look at this skull. From the teeth, we know that this person was only around 30 years old. But he died because of intense work and difficult working conditions.
Even for strong young men in the prime of life, building the first emperor's tomb was a living hell. Tomb workers labored from dawn to dusk, worked to exhaustion, deprived of food and sleep, thousands succumbed to miserable deaths.
After any worker died, his body was thrown in a burial ground rather than in a personal grave. The bones were piled up more than 10 centimeters high.
The first emperor's tomb is entirely impressive. It's wonderful, it's innovative, it's inspirational. The tomb is also shocking because of the human suffering it caused.
The tomb's horrific toll in human labor wasn't its only cost. No Chinese ruler had ever spent so much money on his tomb. In the end, the price was too high. The first emperor died in 210 BC. The next year, China's exhausted people rose in revolt. 3 years later, his successor was murdered, and his dynasty ended after only 15 years. In the chaos that followed the emperor's death, his tomb may never have been finished. And that might explain why it isn't as tall as it's supposed to be. The tomb built to proclaim an omnipotent dynasty helped destroy it in a single lifetime. But the first emperor's great achievement, a unified China, never fell apart. New rulers would inherit his empire and struggle with a seemingly impossible challenge: how to build great tombs without destroying their dynasties. Eight bloody years have passed since the death of China's first emperor. A peasant leader defeats rival armies and founds China's next imperial dynasty, the Han.
The manner of government of the Han was far less abrasive, far less dramatic, and far less of the harshness that is to be found with the totalitarian approach of the first emperor.
But the first emperor still haunts the new dynasty. His massive tomb dominates the landscape, demanding to be equaled by anyone claiming to succeed him.
The first Han emperor also wanted a tomb which would serve as a monument equally impressive to that of the first emperor. The dilemma for him was how to do this without also causing hardship to the people.
Generations of Han emperors would read that riddle, building a line of gigantic tombs just north of their imperial capital. And that location was no accident. 2,000 years ago, these tombs stood between the Han Empire and its most terrifying enemy, the Huns. Year after year, the murderous nomads swept down from the northern steppes, plundering China's wealth. Han emperors built their tombs where they could help defend the empire.
It's a sign of architectural and monumental strength in a physical sense, also in a spiritual sense. If the spirits of the emperors could live on, then they would be a protective force between those at the capital, those in the Han Empire, and those beyond.
But to offer more than symbolic protection, the imperial tombs would also have to be military outposts. At one tomb, called Anling, archaeologist Jiao Nanfeng has found evidence that they were. Across the road, a modern village still boasts rammed earth walls built during the Han dynasty, when this village was Anling's fortified tomb town.
West of where I'm standing is Anling's